Good afternoon, everyone. Um, on a video a while back, I talked a little bit about something that is important to me, and that's the idea that we really should have cameras in courtrooms so that the public gets to see what their government is up to. And, we're prosecuting people, we're taking away people's freedoms, and openness, transparency is very, very important in courtrooms. And I just don't think that, especially here in Minnesota, we're doing enough to be transparent. Well, I'm in school and I recently did an entire presentation on this topic that I scripted it, I did a lot of research for it, and I'm actually pretty happy with the outcome. It's not the flashiest thing you're ever going to see, but I wanted to share it with you so that you could kind of get a better idea about it. There will be some parts of it that are edited a little bit just to kind of avoid giving away too much information about myself. But take a quick look at it and let me know what you think.
Hello, my name is Nick, and this is my presentation. The topic I've chosen is important to me, and something I think you'll all find relevant. The topic of my presentation is cameras in the courtroom. While you've probably all seen portions of trials on television, all courts have some sort of restriction on broadcasting court proceedings. Minnesota, however, is one of the most restrictive states, even after a 2018 Minnesota Supreme Court ruling that now allows such broadcasting. However, media organizations must now apply for permission to broadcast court proceedings. The judge in the case can choose to allow or disallow the presence of cameras, and both parties in the case must also consent. It wasn't until just last year in 2021 that Minnesota allowed its first fully televised trial, that of Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis police officer who would be convicted of the murder of George Floyd. Before we explore specific reasons in favor of having cameras in courtrooms, let's first examine the reasons that some are in opposition. The reasons can probably be broken down into two main categories: concern that cameras will affect the proceedings, and privacy concerns. The arguments for and against television cameras in courtrooms are as old as television itself. Even before television, concerns that media could affect trials were hotly debated. For example, in the Lindbergh baby trial, State versus Hauptmann, hundreds of journalists, including about 120 photographers, turned up for that trial.
A quiet little town with an old-fashioned courthouse turns into a bedlam carnival. Crowds try to swarm in for the trial. Hundreds of telegraph wires to flash the news, and battalions of photographers, all awaiting the arrival of the leading player in the Hauptmann trial drama at Flemington.
One account reported that, quote, messenger boys ran about and unruly photographers climbed on witness tables to get shots, blinding witnesses with their flashbulbs. Hauptmann launched a failed appeal based on the media circus surrounding his trial, but the American Bar Association moved to ban broadcast trial coverage as a result. While this was not legally binding on the courts, broadcast was largely eliminated from the courts nationwide until in the 1960s, Texas gave judges the authority to make such decisions themselves. However, in 1965, a Texas conviction was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. The court, in Estes versus Texas, found that media presence in the courtroom was so distracting to the participants that the due process was denied to the defendant. 4 justices did dissent. Among them was Justice Byron R. White, who wrote that he feared the court was discouraging, quote, further meaningful study of the use of television at criminal trials. However, the concerns of the court expressed in 1965 still form the basis for resistance to cameras in the courtroom even today. Opponents argue that cameras in the courtroom lead to a number of problems, including the distraction of participants. Other issues include the possibility that lawyers or witnesses may behave differently in front of cameras, possibly grandstanding. Ultimately, opponents argue, cameras prejudice the defendant and deprive them of the fair trial we're all guaranteed under the Constitution. Another concern opponents express is that of privacy. However, courts generally order members of the media to, for example, not show the faces of jurors or minor witnesses, or impose other appropriate restrictions. There is, however, another party whose interests need to be protected. That party is the people, you and me. The courts have long understood that the courtroom must be open for people to observe their government at work. For example, the Supreme Court wrote in Press Enterprise versus Superior Court, quote, "The value of openness lies in the fact that people not actually attending trials can have confidence in the fact that standards of fairness are being observed. The sure knowledge that anyone is free to attend gives assurance that established procedures are being followed and that deviations will become known. Openness thus enhances the basic fairness of the criminal trial and the appearance of fairness so essential to public confidence in the system." Because this value is held by courts nationwide, you're able to, with some exceptions, walk into any courtroom, sit down, and observe the proceedings with very few restrictions. But most of us don't. Even if we wanted to, making time to go to the courthouse is difficult, and attempting to do that for every appearance of an individual defendant would be nearly impossible for anyone attempting to maintain a normal schedule. For this reason, broadcasts of court proceedings increase the access the public has to courts. Despite the Supreme Court's findings in Estes, one of the concurring justices, Justice John Marshall Harlan II, wrote, quote, "The day may come when television will have become so commonplace an affair in the daily life of the average person as to dissipate all reasonable likeliness that its use in courtrooms may disparage the judicial process." I submit to you that that describes the times in which we live in now. Given the ubiquity of both television and online video, it's no longer such an unusual experience to find oneself being broadcast. Furthermore, today's technology is so unintrusive as to be barely noticeable. The cameras of the early days of television were the size of small refrigerators. Today, most trials are covered with cameras the size of a coffee pot, and they don't even require an operator's physical presence. During the pandemic, courts were forced to begin conducting proceedings remotely by Zoom or similar services. In order to ensure access to court proceedings, many courts began streaming these proceedings online. Some of these streams have even become so popular that they now have something of a cult following. While there have undoubtedly been growing pains involved with the courts being forced into a new way of doing things,
I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
overall it's been incredibly successful. Given the unobtrusive nature of modern technology as well as the ease with which broadcasts can take place, not only should professional broadcasters be able to cover trials, but the courts themselves should be airing their proceedings whenever possible. Thanks to the pandemic, most courtrooms already have all the equipment necessary to accomplish this task, and services such as YouTube make the further step of broadcasting simple and cost-free. And I should clarify, I'm not merely talking about state district courts. Rather, I'm talking about every court, state and federal. Whether the court is hearing traffic citations or the Supreme Court of the United States itself, cameras belong there, and the public deserves to see its government in action. During the confirmation of now Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, Senator Chuck Grassley, the then chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, had the following to say.
I can respect that view. I just think it's plain wrong. I and many of my colleagues on this committee believe that allowing cameras in the federal courthouse would open the courts to the public and bring about a better understanding of the court and its work.
The first nationally televised trial was of serial killer Ted Bundy in 1976. Since then, countless trials have been broadcast on television and now online. Yet, Minnesota continues to lag behind. Fortunately, the Minnesota Supreme Court has an advisory committee on the rules of criminal procedure. This committee features legal professionals who are themselves on both sides of this debate. The committee has been ordered to consider and make a recommendation to the court about the possibility of further liberalizing the current policy. The bottom line is this: the courts conduct the people's business. We, the people, therefore have the right to be able to observe this business taking place. With today's powerful and relatively inexpensive technology, every court should, as a matter of course, not only allow the broadcast of its proceedings, but should themselves conduct such broadcasts. It's not only a good idea, it's the right thing to do. I hope I was able to offer some meaningful ideas for your consideration. I look forward to your comments and questions. Thanks.
All right. Well, that was my presentation, and I hope that you found it interesting. Even if you don't agree, that's fine. Let me know in the comments what you think. And I'm always open to being told that I'm wrong, uh, and having a good conversation about it, as long as we can do it respectfully. And I think that kind of interchange of ideas is really important. So yeah, tell me I'm right, tell me I'm wrong, whatever you want. Hit like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll see you in the next one.